we have Professor Jeremy Meyer, who is Professor of Government at the University of Doctoral, and he's a specialist in U.S. Politics and presidential politics. So the idea of this interview is to know his opinion, first in general about the presidential politics, and more particularly in terms of the current presidential campaign in the foreign process. So my first question would be, could you explain to the Mexican public what are the primaries and when did they start it, and what would be the main difference between the Republican and Democratic primaries?
So primaries have only been the dominant method of selecting presidential nominees since 1972. Primaries began existing in the late 19th century. The idea was to have small elections to measure some aspect of the popularity of various people who might represent the party in the real election. The initial method for selecting presidential candidates was called King Caucus. So for the first 30 years of American politics, it was members of the House of Representatives who were of the party that was trying to choose a nominee, and those people would vote. Now, they didn't have to vote among the members of Congress. They could pick a governor, they could pick whoever, but they were a caucus of elites. In 1832, an anti-immigrant party called the Know Nothings held a convention. And this was an innovation where the political elites of each state would go to a city and debate and argue, and they quickly were adopted by the main political parties. Mm-hmm. So from the 1840s up until 1968, it was called the convention system. And the conventions were sometimes lasting 2 or more weeks. Mm-hmm. They were very unpredictable. They were still elite-driven, but it was a larger group of elites, so it was a little more democratic. And the reason we chose primaries after 1968 was the disastrous Democratic Convention of 1968. Do you want this much history?
Sure, yeah.
So 1968, the biggest issues were civil rights domestically and Vietnam internationally. And on Vietnam, the Democrats were pro-war with President Johnson. The Republicans were pro-war with nominee Richard Nixon. And then there was a third-party candidate who was really pro-war. So on the biggest foreign policy issue, it looked like 3 parties had nominated people with the same position. And that seemed to be undemocratic. And what happened at the convention was the bosses, the machine politicians, were picking a pro-war nominee, Hubert Humphrey. And there was rioting outside. Young people, hippies, were protesting this, and there was great brutality, lots of bloodshed in these riots. And inside, there was fighting and turmoil as the anti-war Democrats said, no, we're not going to nominate this guy. This also happened the same summer that Bobby Kennedy was assassinated. He was running and was hoping to win the nomination by winning primaries when it was actually done by convention. And also, of course, Martin Luther King had been shot on April 4th before that. So there was a great deal of turmoil. The Democrats appointed a committee, and the committee came up with, we're going to make the primaries binding.
Okay.
Every state is going to hold either a primary, or very few chose also to run a statewide caucus, which is a different piece. And each state's primary will determine which delegates go to the convention. So the conventions no longer get to decide unless the primaries didn't pick a winner. And every year since 72, they have picked a winner. There's never been a convention that we don't pretty much know who's going to win based on the primary. So what is a primary? It's a little election that runs on different rules depending on the national political campaign committee of each party and state law. Okay. And a little bit of federal law. The federal law that regulates primary campaigning is mostly finance. So the money rules are created by the feds. The electioneering rules are created by the states. And the procedural rules are created by states and state parties. Let me give you an example. Primaries can be open, semi-open, or closed. Now, open primary means any citizen of the state who's a registered voter can vote. So the Democratic primary, they can walk in and say, I'd like a ballot and I'll vote. And this makes the parties weaker because the other party can come in and vote strategically. Semi-open is anyone who's a Democrat can vote in the Democratic primary. Anyone who's registered as an independent with no party can vote in the Democratic Party. But anyone registered Republican or any other party, we do have a few other parties, they can't vote in the Democratic Party primary. And then a closed primary, only members of that party can vote. And so those are the basic rules, and those are set by each state. So you can get a sense of how strong political parties are in a state by how whether it's a closed or open or semi-open. Another thing that happens in each state is the ballot access is determined by the state. So some states make it very easy for people to get on the ballot. Other states make it harder. And so it takes a lot of lawyers and a lot of money to get on each state's ballot. And that's true of the general election. The primaries are more state controlled. And so elites in a state can't control primaries as much. They can't, as they used to control. Like it used to be, a great example is Illinois. So the big dominant Democratic power in Illinois for decades was the mayor of Chicago. The rest of Illinois leaned Republican. Chicago is so huge that it's a big, huge ball of Democrats outweighing all those rural areas. And so the mayor of Chicago was a kingmaker. He would go to the Democratic convention, he'd control all the delegates. And if you were someone he liked, he could deliver. And Illinois is a very big state, and it would vote as a mass. And if he didn't like you, you're dead. Well, the mayor of Chicago can endorse someone today for the Illinois, but the voters might do what he says, or they might not. Is it better to be endorsed than not? Usually, yes. But it's the media, it's the candidates, it's the campaigns, and ultimately it's the voting public in each primary that determines. Another aspect of primaries that make them very different is generally low turnout. So turnout in a caucus can be as low as 1 or 2 or 3% of the voting population. A good primary gets 20% turnout. That's really high. So it's a subset of each party's electorate. And one of the problems that scholars have identified with primaries is they tend to bring out the extremes. This is particularly true of the Republicans. Republicans in our system have been moving further and further and further and further to the right since 1976, and it's almost inexorable just how much the pull. And you see this in primary elections most particularly. Now, the Democrats have had some of that, but nowhere near as much ideological pull. So primaries are expensive, unpredictable, and another thing that's different from any other system, it's very different in Mexico, but it's very different from any other democracy, is how long this takes. We have the longest election process of any democracy on earth. So I'm giving this interview in late October of 2023. It is already too late by normal standards for anyone to decide they want to run for president.
It's too late.
It's too late. Because if you were going to run for president, you would have had to raise $20 million, $30 million. You'd need to have campaign staff on the ground in Iowa and in other early primary states if you wanted to run. So the Republicans who are running against Trump, they've all been doing this for months. They've all been thinking about it for longer. And that is a huge change. In the convention era, you could decide at the convention in August that you wanted the nomination. Now, that's not recommended. That wasn't the best strategy, but it worked. People did it, and they got the nomination. We haven't seen it. Trump, the great outsider, the one who no one expected to win, including me, he did the traditional thing, though. He started running in 2015. He didn't just show up and say, nominate me. He did the game. He raised money. He ran in primaries. He had staff. He broke a lot of rules, but he didn't break the basic rule that you have to spend months and months and months and months doing it. I look with envy and awe at the political systems where they have a 6-week election cycle. And they just say, okay, we're going to pick. And we don't have that here. It takes forever to do the primaries and to begin the money raising. I should clarify something. There is a small amount of public finance that affects the primaries, but the importance of that keeps dropping. Most of the money now being raised is raised in what we call dark money, super PACs. And so take DeSantis, the governor of Florida, who's trying to beat Trump and failing badly. He has put most of his raised money into a super PAC that is working in these states to bring out DeSantis voters. That's because the PACs don't have to follow the same federal campaign finance rules. So if I am a wealthy donor and I love DeSantis, I can give his campaign roughly I think it's around $8,000 or $9,000 total. That's all I can do. And if I'm a billionaire, I spend that much on dinner. That's nothing to me. But through his super PAC, I can end up giving millions. And the rule is kind of silly. The super PAC cannot directly coordinate its campaign messaging, or campaign strategy, or election strategy with the campaign.
So they just give the money and then the campaign strategy do the campaign? Or
so they have separate strategies. The geniuses on the PAC are really smart people. Usually they graduated from the campaign. So there's some personnel, and the personnel, don't have to wipe their brains clean. But they generally know how DeSantis is going to run, and they can look at what the campaign is saying. But the PAC cannot coordinate with them under federal campaign finance law. It's a really ridiculous rule. And there's a very funny video that your students can find. The former head of the FCC was on one of our comedy shows, The Daily Show, several years ago, and the talk show host was running for president as a joke. But he said, you be my super PAC and I'll be the candidate. Have we broken the law if we do this? If we've broken the law if we do this? And it's silly what is legal and what is not legal. But the idea is that we don't want the candidates to have too close a connection to the dirtier money of the PAC. Because the whole purpose of our campaign finance system was to reduce the perception and reality of corruption.
Okay. But is it the same in the two parts? I mean, the Democrats do the same?
Yes, they both do it, even though the Democrats are on paper in favor of totally changing campaign finance and stopping super PACs. They have to use super PACs because the Republicans do. It would be unilateral disarmament. So it's like if one nation was against nuclear weapons, but had them, you can't throw them in the ocean until the other party does the same.
Okay. And since we started talking about Trump, how would you explain that he's not going to the debate, and even so he's leading as the candidate for the Republican party?
So Donald Trump is doing a front-runner strategy more boldly than anyone in the modern era. So Ronald Reagan in 1980 had a very substantial lead. And he didn't want to debate, but they guilted him into debating, and he did very well because he was great on TV. Trump doesn't want to debate and doesn't have to. There's no requirement. There's no law that says he has to. The only pressure that he would face is if the voters started to punish him for not showing up at the debates. They are not doing it.
But you know that both by the polls or the actual
The polls. We're talking about polls. If Trump started to fall and the other candidates started to lead because Trump didn't go to the debates, then he would start to go to the debates. But he doesn't like them. He can make bad mistakes. And why not? It's a demonstration of his strength. What's really happening is American politics, since the founding, has never seen anything like that. Because of the passion and charisma that he's able to wield a great power over his voters that we've never seen in America. And it's very undemocratic because in a democracy, you shouldn't love the person, you should love the policies, you should, or not fall so in love with an image.
You wrote a piece on presidencialism.
Yes.
And in that piece you mentioned like 4 different factors that explain the image of the person. One was the reality of the character of the person, the other was the team, what the team was doing, and that was the media, how the media, and the other was how the opposition present the person. How, well, that paper you didn't analyze Trump.
He hadn't been elected yet.
if you had to analyze Trump with those with those variables, how would you explain it? I mean, you say he had been able to build the connection with the Republican electorate.
Yeah.
But
So Trump has a very clear and powerful personality, and in 2016 he used social media to talk over standard media. The standard media was very negative about Trump. So if you do a normal analysis and you say, wow, 87% of the coverage of Trump was negative. I don't know, it's something like that. I don't know what they said.
Right.
Then you would have said, oh, this guy's going to lose. Because one of the 4 factors that determine presidential image is the media. But I wrote that before social media was powerful. And Trump was on Twitter getting his message out. The other thing that was going on is that even though the media said negative things about him, they gave him endless airtime. So his rallies were carried live, start to finish, on Fox and sometimes on CNN and MSNBC. Why didn't they cover Hillary's rallies as much? Because her rallies were boring. She gave out her speech in advance. They knew she was going to talk about jobs for auto workers or the environment or this. And she's never been exciting. And they don't normally cover those entire speeches on a campaign trail. But Trump was great TV. He was unscripted. No one knew if he was going to sing along with the Rolling Stones song or if he was going to declare war on North Korea. So he's a reality TV star. He knows almost nothing about American politics. Even today, every time he opens his mouth and tries to talk about American politics, he demonstrates a stupidity that would get you failing high school government. I'm not even joking. Like, his ignorance is epic, but he's a genius of television. He knows what makes good TV. And what makes good TV is mistakes. What makes good TV is drama, attacks, venom, jokes, music. And so his speeches, I don't see them as charismatic. But 20 to 38% of the white population of this country, actually it's more than that, it's more like 30 to 50% of the white population of this country sees Trump and goes, ah, that's my guy. And there's an additional percent that maybe they don't love him, but they hate the other side so much, they're like, well,
Biden, I mean, you would say that Biden is not that popular? Or
oh, Biden's very unpopular. Biden is one of the most unpopular presidents we've had. What's the difference? How did he beat Trump when Hillary didn't? Huh. People could be made to hate Hillary. Like there was a real, like I had friends on Facebook from elementary school, from high school, who said things like Hillary Clinton, that actually believe Hillary, or claim to believe, that Hillary is a murderer and killed 90 people. Some of it's an old lie against Bill Clinton that they've resuscitated against Hillary. And so she was not a good politician, and we could demonize her very, very effectively. So the 2016 election, we've never had someone nominated with as unpopular personal ratings as Hillary. The one exception, Donald Trump. He was slightly less popular than she was. They were both underwater. More people didn't like them than liked them. But these people that disliked Trump, there was, if you dislike both of them, more of those people voted for Trump. So the people that didn't like Hillary and didn't like Trump tended to vote for Trump, particularly among white people. And that's how 2016. Joe Biden was different. Joe Biden didn't have, in 2020, those kind of high negatives. And he just was seen as such a nice guy, a very harmless guy, and safe guy. And that's how he won.
Yeah, but for example, now it's a new game. And he's, I mean, even when he's when Trump is charismatic and popular, the thing that he did in the Congress, I mean, in January, didn't cost him. I mean, like, to say it's not just the amount of charisma, but some how dangerous it could be for the American institution.
So it cost him. It did cost him. I have data from a survey that we did of 1,048 adults in March, from January to March of 2020, so right after January 6th. And those data clearly show anger at Trump among Republicans and say this was terrible. Why is that number gone down so low? So few Republicans care about January 6th today. Well, because their party leaders don't talk about January 6th. The Republican Party leadership very quickly said, we're just going to forget that this ever happened. And then gradually, more and more of them began saying it was a hoax. It was no big deal. There's almost no one in the Congress today who's a Republican who cares about January 6th, because the very few people who did got voted out. Trump attacked them, and they lost their primary. That's it. Almost all of them are gone. Mitt Romney is the last one, and he's retired. So the reason the public doesn't care about January 6th, I mean, and not to say the entire public, but the Republican voters, is because men like Mitch McConnell and Kevin McCarthy, who on the first days after January 6th said, this is terrible. Within a week or two, they either went silent, which is what McConnell did, just doesn't talk about it, or McCarthy went down to Florida, Mar-a-Lago, and sucked up to him within 2 weeks. And then he's been welcomed back into Trump support. And so the electorate is prone, the Republican electorate is prone to believe that this either wasn't a big deal or was actually a Democratic plot to make Republicans look good.
And about all the case of the legal cases that there's against him, I mean, that doesn't ring a bell to the Republican voter? Or
if it was going to ring a bell, it would have already been run. Like normally, a presidential candidate who was under indictment for anything would have a real tough time getting the nomination. It's just not going to happen. Trump is different because of that passion, that charisma that he has, and the passion that it causes in his base. He's immune. Trump has told more than 35,000 lies. The Washington Post tracked it. One thing he said that has deep truth. Very early on, he said, I could go out in the middle of Fifth Avenue, shoot someone. My base would still be with me. And that's true. And so why aren't they leaving him after January 6th or after 4 criminal indictments? Actually, it's 93 criminal indictments. Well, in October of 2016, a video came out where he talked about sexually assaulting women. And that didn't move them. He won. So that's why I say it's very dangerous in a democracy to have someone who's immune to public criticism. It's not the way a democracy can function. You should not say, I'm for Trump, whatever he said. There were a lot of Republicans who were very worried about Obama. They used to say, oh, Democrats love him too much, he's going to be a dictator. And there were very serious Republicans during Roosevelt's presidency saying, this is dangerous, it's a cult of personality. And there were many dictators rising up. I think there's some merit to the concerns about Roosevelt, the Republicans had. I don't think the concerns about Obama were. But Trump is a threat to democracy because his base loves him so intensely, he can do it.
So what would be your idea in terms of what's going to happen for the Republican Party? He's winning that, or it depends of the legal issues.
It does not depend on the legal issues.
So even if they find him guilty of several things,
if impeachment, 2 impeachments didn't move, why would a court ruling move the vote?
You don't lose your rights if you are in the state.
There was a presidential candidate in 1920 by the name of Eugene Debs, who was running as a socialist, and he ran from prison. He got 1 million votes. There is no barrier.
So you can run from prison.
You can run from prison. And I don't know that Trump is going to go to prison. He's delaying all these trials. He has been involved before the presidency in more than 4,000 civil and criminal cases. So his lawyers know how to play this game. He just delays trials, delays judgments, because his lawyers are constant, and other people usually don't have lawyers that they can always depend. He's going to get a verdict this time because he's made several prosecutors. But that verdict may not come before the election in any of these cases. There's going to be Supreme Court cases, there's going to be procedural motions. The one that's going to slow down the most is one of the secret documents.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Because there's so many ways you can say, we need another ruling by a separate judge because this is secret.
And in that sense, you think he's winning the fight? There is no, he will be the candidate.
There are only a couple of things that could stop him. One is his health. He is a very, very unhealthy human. He's overweight, eats like a teenager, and never exercises. The one good thing he does for his health is all of his life he's never smoked or drank. But he eats fast food and then doesn't eat vegetables. And he literally believes, this is how dumb he is. He's said for years that he doesn't exercise because he thinks we're all given a battery. And if you exercise, you use up your energy. And, he just believes that because it makes sense to him. Screw those doctors who know differently. So he could have a health crisis, a stroke, a heart attack. He could die. That's the big thing that stops him. The other thing that could stop him, although I don't think it's going to happen, the Republicans running against him could pick one of them, and all the others drop out. The way he got the nomination in 2016 was because the Republican establishment never unified behind one candidate. And that allowed Trump to win with 35%, 42%, 44%. And they have a winner-take-all clause in many Republican primaries. They don't have them in the Democrats. So, again, the two primaries run differently based on the parties. So Trump benefited from this split field in 2016. In 2024, again, there's a lot of Republicans running, and they're all trying to figure out how anti-Trump should I be, how pro-Trump should I be, and but they're all splitting the non-Trump vote. And the non-Trump vote right now is about 30 to 38%.
And that goes as DeSantis and King, or who?
DeSantis is dropping like a paralyzed fat. He's never caught fire. And it's really strange. I think it's mostly not about Trump at all. There's gettable votes out there, like 30%. Why aren't they flocking to DeSantis? I think it's because his campaign is not being run well, but also the candidate who doesn't have charisma that extends beyond Florida. He's a very awkward, almost autistic presence, and it's not working for whatever reason. Haley is a strong possibility. Scott is a strong possibility. They're both from South Carolina. But the problem is, unless it's just one, if it gets down to Trump versus Haley, she has a shot. But that would mean everyone else drops out, and they're not going to do that.
They're not going to probably.
No, I don't think so, because if you run for president in America, you have gone to your spouse and you've said, do you mind if we don't have any income for the next 16 months? Do you mind if I'm not home for about 60 to 70% of the days between now and March, or maybe longer? And I'm going to be calling everyone we know, trying to raise money. And do you mind? And so you've committed, you've made promises to your staff. If you withdraw now, then all the people, 80 people, 150 people that you said, come to Iowa, work for me, I'm in this. Then you say, I'm not in this. It's a really hard conversation. So most people wait to hear from the voters. When you come in 6th and 5th and 6th and 5th, then the money dries up because nobody wants to give you money because you're a loser. And then the people start to quit anyway because you can't pay them. And then you fold up.
Okay. And you talk about Trump's health. In the international press, there's a lot of word about Biden in terms of the aid. Why is he doing no one?
I think so, but I had a piece last month in USA Today, an op-ed, where I argued, hey, it's not too late. Someone can challenge Joe Biden. But no one's.
Wouldn't that be worse for the Democratic Party?
Everyone thinks so, but I argued in my piece that no, that's not true. And there is a way to run against Biden that doesn't hurt Biden.
Really?
Yeah, that's my idea. Anyway, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong because no one's done it. But you're exactly right. The conventional wisdom is that a divided primary, a contested primary, is bad for Biden.
Yeah.
And you don't want to do that because Biden's probably going to win. And if he then goes on to lose in the general election, then you're the one that did it and you'll be hated because you reelected Trump as a Democrat. But I don't buy that anymore. One of the good things about Donald Trump is he taught us that a lot of the normal rules of American politics can be broken. They're just assumptions. No one's tested them. So why not enter in? Because Biden really is old. He's 3 years older than Trump.
Yeah.
So that's not really a big difference, right? But he seems older because he has a stutter, and Trump is just so outrageous. But judged by normal standards, Biden knows so much more than Trump about government. Like he knows so much more about foreign policy. Yeah, but he actually knows it. And that means that I worry less about Biden's age than I do about Trump's age, because Trump has so few brain cells that know anything about government that if he were to lose some, it would be quite serious. Now, Biden should have a challenge, and he won't. I don't think. And one of the reasons why is Kamala Harris. She's not had a good vice president. So most vice presidents don't get super popular. It's kind of a gray job where you go to funerals and you're an attack dog, and it's. But she's done worse than the norm. Worse than the norm, right? So if someone were to run against Biden and win, the argument from the base of the Democratic Party, from particularly Black women, would be, you took the spot that was reserved for Kamala. She was supposed to be the next president after Biden, because the vice presidency is the stepping stone. And so there would be that problem. You would diminish Black turnout unless you are Black. That was the theory. I think Biden will be the nominee unless he has a health crisis, which an 80-year-old man could fall over dead tomorrow. I mean, it's certainly quite possible. And if that happens, boy, the Democrats, I think, they would probably have to nominate Kamala. And she is actually not a bad politician. Before she became vice president, she's pretty good. Okay. What she has is a problem with staff. Doesn't inspire loyalty among her staff. Biden, that's his secret weapon. Biden has a great staff. Journalists in this town are dying for lack of scoops and leaks. Under Trump,
loyalty.
Under Trump, loyalty was to nobody. Like, you leaked all the time because he did.
Yeah.
And so Bob Woodward wouldn't even have to do his usual tricks. He just gets the story. But this White House, they don't leak. They don't fight in public. Even, they're not all a happy family, but they're smart enough to pretend to be a happy family. And the vast majority of them are really good at their job. None of that was true of Trump. And it's because Biden has learned how to inspire long-term relationships, how to recognize quality and keep it close to it. Kamala Harris doesn't have it.
But why Biden hasn't been able to do that with the American public? I mean, if the economy is doing okay, good, he's resolving most of the crisis, he looks like a leadership system to rely on. Why people don't give credit to him or is it something?
So if you look at Biden's popularity, the change point was Afghanistan. The withdrawal from Afghanistan, where 13 American soldiers died in a bombing outside the airport, and then the pictures of chaos, and then the Taliban did. And from that point, Biden never got close to 50% approval. In fact, under war, more Americans disapproved from that point on. So early in his presidency, he had pretty good numbers. He was doing all right. Why is he low? Well, I think he looked fumbling in Afghanistan, and that the caricature of him as a bumbler is so powerfully portrayed by Fox News, by the Republican Party, that it's just become conventional wisdom. If you look at Biden's record in 4 years, the things he's managed to get through Congress, the infrastructure bill, which was bipartisan, the stimulus, which was not bipartisan, getting budgets passed, getting the chip bill about Chinese economic power passed, plus the way he's handled Ukraine, masterful foreign policy, marshaling an alliance of the West, including some new members. And it's extraordinary. But the Afghan mistake, it was a bad mistake. He was left holding a shit sandwich, but we still blame him for it. That's the logical point, and I agree with you, but that's not the voters. And also, he did make a mistake with inflation. People were warning him for his stimulus bill. They said it's too large, and we've already escaped. people like Larry Summers, former Treasury Secretary under Obama, said, got to pull back or we're going to be facing terrible inflation. Summers was right. The Biden team was wrong. We have really bad inflation. That went down eventually, so that today it's not so bad. But the economy is doing well compared to any Western European major economy. They'd all trade their economies for ours like that. But to the American public, inflation is one of the most important numbers. And the other number that's going to bite Biden in the ass, gasoline. The war in Israel with Palestine is going to spread. There's going to be a border war with Lebanon. Now, Lebanon and Palestine don't have oil. No. Although Lebanon is now getting some natural gas along with Israel. But the conflict will make oil prices go high. And inflation is a very political number. But of all the goods in America, gasoline is the most important goods inflation. And so if gas is up, and gas was already creeping up because of Ukraine. Yeah. So it's very, very serious, the problems that Biden will face. The only Republican that Biden is guaranteed to beat, I think, is Trump.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So Biden will beat Trump if it's Trump versus, because there's no, that's if there's no big change in the economy, no big foreign policy disaster, no major health crisis for Biden. If you rerun the 2020 election, because the electorate is younger now, and young people don't like Trump. Okay. There's some new voters come in. A lot of Trump's base is people over 65. And so as people die, and it's white people that are old now, white people die and are replaced by younger and browner people, the Democrats do better. So if you rerun 2020 and 2024, I expect Biden to win with those caveats. But it's Biden versus Haley. Yeah. She should beat him like a red-headed stepchild. I think the Democrats are fools.
Friends are really wrong.
But wouldn't it be funny if the Democrats stick with old Joe because of Trump, and then Trump dies or gets a stroke and can't be the nominee, and they pick somebody like Tim Scott, Nikki Haley? Either one of those candidates, Biden, I think, would be.
I want to talk about another recent book that you wrote about Project. And there you say that there were like big changes in terms of this structural things like the South and how well you were arguing in terms of like other issues that are coming and like the difference between the southern states that are growing, the southern states that are
stagnant.
And you think that what we saw since you wrote that book is that and that we also talk about like the race is not that important as it used to be, but we saw in the recent most recent years that especially in the South, this thing of race and of migration becomes like big issues. Yeah. Would that be those would be big issues for the next general election in the states, or no, or there would be the other issues like the foreign policy. Let's talk about the influence.
So let me just say that race is less important than it was, but still very important. Right? I mean, if you and I, as political scientists, were trying to guess how an American would vote, the first thing we want to know is your party. The second thing we want to know is what's your race. So if a voter with no description came into this room, those two questions, if I know the answer to those, I got a pretty good chance of getting how you're going to vote. Okay. So race still is important in the South and all over. It's just less important than it was. And it's changing in the way it's important. And immigration is a good choice of issue. So immigration, doesn't play racially as easily as you think it does. There are a lot of Hispanics that are against immigrants.
Yeah.
And they voted for Trump more than they voted for Romney in 2012.
That was my other question.
And he did better in 2020 with Hispanics than he did in 2016. So why?
Yeah.
Well, I asked one of my students after 2016, I said, hey, you're Hispanic. You were saying that Trump is anti-immigrant. Why do you think so many Hispanics voted for Trump? He did better than Romney. And he said, well, I'm Ecuadorian. And when my parents heard Trump saying immigrants are dirty and criminals and rapists, they don't think he's talking about Ecuadorians. They think he's talking about Mexicans. My parents hate Mexicans. And so the Hispanic vote is not as unified as the black vote.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's a vote of nationalities. Venezuelans and Cubans are increasingly voting Republican. Or actually, Cubans have been voting Republican for quite a while. And so it's the racial, and also in immigration, some of the most anti-immigrant people in America are blacks. Yeah. So whites are the most in a general category. But there's a subset of the black vote that is really anti-immigrant because most white people are actually not competing with immigrants for jobs. But there are some blacks who legitimately feel, and probably correctly so, that there's a downward pull on their wages because of illegal immigrants. And if they don't, and even if it's not real, they feel that. And so one of the issues that Trump also did better among blacks than Romney did.
Really?
Yeah, not much, but particularly male black voters see something in Trump. And now that's not a lot of them. I'm not saying it's like 50%. It's more like 15%, 20%, 17% supported Trump in certain states. But that's a huge loss for the Democratic Party, which takes us to Tim Scott. Tim Scott's a black man running for president as a Republican. He's a senator from South Carolina. If he gets on the ticket as vice president or as the nominee for president, I think he's going to get 25% of black vote. And if that happens, that's terrible news for you.
But he would go with Trump as a Trump would just,
Scott would take that nomination, sure.
Oh, he would, but Trump would take him.
I think Trump is transactional. I think he would, if he felt he needed to do it to win, he would do it.
When they choose the vice president?
There's no rule, there's no law. Historically, it's happened at the convention. It's the one remaining excitement point about the convention. So sometimes they keep it a secret until like the third day or the second day. But Trump understands the value of excitement. So he doesn't have a nominee for vice president. If he is the nominee, he's going to do it like a reality TV show. He's going to interview people. It's going to be like it's like The Apprentice, his TV show. Which one of these people is going to get fired?
And the other issue that is coming like that, so I think it's the reproductive rights of women. Like there would be like maybe the weapon of the Democrats for this election, or no?
It will. It's going to help the Democrats, and that's one of the reasons that I think Biden would beat Trump. And that is an issue that's going to move young voters, some women voters, some men voters, but how many voters is it going to move that it weren't already voting Democrat? That's the question that we don't know. Now, there is some encouraging information. Referendum in places like Kansas, and Kansas is traditionally quite red, they voted for abortion rights in a referendum. But those were elections only about abortion. Same thing happened in Ohio, a very red state. Again, they voted on a referendum that would have weakened the pro-choice movement. They voted pro-choice. But will they vote only on abortion? How many voters will vote just on abortion? A lot less. But yes, it's a good issue for the Democrats. What you're going to see, though, is the Republican response. There's going to be ads about partial birth abortion.
Okay.
late-term abortion, 8-month abortion, and they're going to be ugly. They're going to be graphic and bloody, and they're going to say, "You might not agree with us about 15 weeks, but I know you can agree with Democrats about abortions in the 8th. They're killing babies." That's going to be so. The Republicans have a counter argument that they're going to. They haven't hit it yet because they want to keep it safe and new, and then they're going to unleash the Kraken.
But then, what would be the almost 500 questions? What would be the strategy for the Biden campaign, the Trump campaign, in terms of what they did and the state that they won? I mean, in the Mexican media, there was a lot of talk about how Biden recovered, like the North Industrial Park and the thing of the Pennsylvania, and the South, and the thing of the South that was also important for him. Do you think would be revisited of that type of strategy for both of them, or no? They would try to, I don't know, to mobilize the response from different parts.
So Biden is going to wrap himself around two things. First, fear of Trump. If he's running against Trump, he's going to say, "This is our democracy at stake." And he's going to show footage of January 6th. He's going to show footage of Trump at his craziest and just say, "That's not good for us." And second thing, he's going to talk about all of his accomplishments and how he's a steady hand and make people feel safe, which he'll be able to do if inflation's under control, the economy's doing okay. That's the Biden strategy. It's going to be focused on battleground states. I don't see a big shift in the battleground states, except Democrats may not make a play for Florida. I mean, Florida's just killed them. It wasn't even close in 2016 or 2020. And it's so many millions of dollars to run in Florida. For my money, I'm disappointed that Biden hasn't opened to Cuba, because the reason they're not opening to Cuba dramatically, going back to Obama's strategy, is because they fear the Cuban voters in Florida. Those voters are gone. Just do the right thing. So that battleground might be the big shift. Georgia is going to be a battleground, which it wasn't. People didn't expect it in 2020. It's really amazing. North Carolina. But yeah, it's going to be the same basic list of states. Nothing dramatic is changing.
Thank you very much.
Oh, my pleasure.